Thank you, Presiding Officer. Let me be clear. This is a budget which sees millions asked to pay more so that millionaires can pay less. 14,000 people earning over £1 million across the United Kingdom about to get a tax cut of £40,000, a cut 1.5 times the average salary of people in Scotland. As Anne McTaggart has said, we are not all in this together. Presiding Officer, I'd like to take a moment to focus on this issue of the 50p tax debacle and what happened late at night in Westminster yesterday. I'm sure the SNP couldn't resist it, and when Mr Swinney mentioned it, it was actually quite funny. You know, we appreciate it. I particularly liked the bit when he said it was the most interesting FOI he had ever seen. Perhaps that's because the ones he signs off have a lot more redactions in them.
Not as many as yours.
But, thank you. But, Presiding Officer, when backbencher after backbencher chooses to mention it in their speech, I find it rather sad, because in choosing to waste precious debate time to gloat about a little bit of clever manoeuvring in Westminster, they are losing the opportunity. They are losing the opportunity to share the experiences of their
Order. We'll hear the member, please.
Mr Hepburn, I'm not going to take it on this occasion. Summing up is about answering points, and considering your members have obsessed about this issue, I'm going to use my opportunity to reply. The reality is that Labour's record on the 50p tax rate is consistent. We introduced it. Our position is clear. My colleague Malcolm Chisholm outlined what's going to happen next in terms of Labour putting amendments forward. Please let me go on for a second, Ms Scanlon. I'll let you in if I can. What is less clear is the First Minister's position. 3 big speeches on the economy this year alone, not one single mention of the 50p tax rate being at the heart of progressive politics. No mention of the 50p tax rate in the SNP's manifesto. No mention in the SNP submission to the budget. Presiding Officer, I asked Spice to do a LexisNexis search into the terms SNP and 50p tax rate. It said no relevant results. So I'm afraid the record is not a consistent one. Mary, I'd like to... On you go.
Ms Scanlon.
Well, if the 50p tax rate is so wonderful, why did it take you 12 years and 11 months of a 13-year government in order to introduce it?
Kezia Dugdale.
Presiding Officer, our view on the 50p tax rate is clear. In difficult economic times, people who have more should be asked to pay more. That is fundamentally what our position was about. And whilst we're on the topic of Mary Scanlon's position, she did manage to say in her speech that the 50p tax rate both turned off investment in Scotland at the same time as saying nobody paid it. It cannot be both. What I would say, Presiding Officer, is not every SNP backbencher chose to make cheap political points. And I would like to pay credit to Joan McAlpine's speech, so if you wished a second you might hear it. Joan McAlpine deserves credit because she talked about the real-life experiences of her constituents. I was recently in Dumfries talking to young people about life as an unemployed person in a rural community, and I appreciate that this budget does nothing for them. But I would also say to her gently that our own front bench could do so much more to help young unemployed people in rural constituencies. Presiding Officer, Willie Rennie said that this is a budget that he's very proud of. He said the words people on low incomes will benefit significantly. I'd like to move on, Ms McAlpine, if that's okay. I think you might like this. I wonder, therefore, if he is aware that the Child Poverty Action Group this week said that 100,000 of low earners across the United Kingdom will gain just £33 from the rise of the tax threshold once you take into consideration all the other changes that his government is making, not the £220 that he claimed. I worked out that that's less than 10 pence a day. Is that really something you're proud of, Mr Rennie?
Rennie?
I think she's looking at things in isolation again. She needs to consider that this is a substantial change. Those who are on the minimum wage will benefit substantially from this. I thought this kind of progressive move is something that Labour would welcome.
Kezia Dugdale.
Presiding Officer, I think Mr Rennie might want to meet Child Poverty Action Group and ask them about the rigour of their figures. It's not my position, it's theirs, and he should listen to it very carefully. Stuart McMillan intervened on both Ken McIntosh and Gavin Brown's speech to talk about welfare advisers in Inverclyde, and I would say to him that Mr McIntosh was right. When local authorities are faced with 90% cuts to their budget, they face difficult choices. But if he is so concerned about cuts to welfare advisers in Inverclyde, perhaps he could look to see what Labour did in Wales. And the Labour government in Wales gave money directly to local authorities to protect the jobs of welfare advisers. And if he's really concerned, he can put that argument to his Finance Secretary and argue for the same cash. Moving on, Presiding Officer, I'm sorry, I don't have time. I'm sorry, we'll talk about it later in the bar if you like. How about that? It's a date. Presiding Officer, Mark MacDonald in his speech said it was perfectly okay for his party to like some aspects of the budget and vote against it overall. I agree. That's the exact approach that this party has taken to budget for years, and perhaps you might like to reflect on that. In closing, Presiding Officer, Mr Brown and Mr Rennie are welcome to celebrate their budget, but the stark reality is that there are 1 million young unemployed people in the United Kingdom, and there's no national wage subsidy scheme in this budget. The economy has stalled and there's no plan for growth. The government have an overarching purpose to pay down the deficit, yet they're borrowing £150 billion more in order to deliver the austerity programme we've heard so much about today. It is hurting, but it is not working. I'm in my last 30 seconds, Mr Brown, so I support the Labour amendment. We cannot support the SNP's motion today simply because we do not believe the answer is separation. Thank you, Presiding Officer.